Welcome everyone to another episode of Let's Make a Game. The previous time we added our villagers. They are not yet completely bug-free and of course they are not fleshed out fully. We will tend to them every now and then again and improve on their AI, pathfinding algorithms and so on and so forth. But today's topic is going to be a GUI. So today we want to start with the GUI which the player can use. The graphics of course are as per usual temporary, they are just placeholders so that we can get ourselves started. What we want to do is create a system so that we can add categories of actions you can perform. For instance, there will be a building category or there will be a gathering category and so on and so forth. We want to do this in a way so that we can display all of the buttons at the lower left of our screen while they are actually outside the rooms, being placed automatically using scripts, of course. Another thing I intend to do is optimize stuff such as the villagers so that we can load objects which are not within the screen, so objects that are not visible, and all of the unimportant objects which do not... Okay guys, in order to speed things a little bit up, I went ahead and created myself a sprite called Sprite Menu Main. It consists of 5 images, numbered with category 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Again, this will be subject to change a lot. Another thing I already prepared is creating 4 new scripts. The first one, menu main, the second one, activate important objects, third one, assign menu main sprites, and the final one, hide interface. All of these scripts are currently empty. We will code everything together, but I thought I could speed things up a little bit doing that. Anyways, we're also going to create a new object. This is going to be the object menu main. Gonna assign the correct sprite, and since this is a GUI item, we're gonna set it to -100, so it will be on top no matter what. Alright, next up we need to make sure that all of these scripts are applied somewhere. Most of them will be on the hard objects, that's our dedicated core object here, and one of them will be on the menu main. So let's do that first. We're gonna add a create event and we're gonna add the script assign menu main sprites, and that should be done. Maybe I'm gonna rename this to assign menu sprites instead. That would probably make more sense because it's probably a reusable script. But nevertheless, within our object hard in the create event we want to add another script, namely the script menu main, okay? Now we need to add another script which is an end step. So at the end of a step this will happen and everything in here will happen before this. That is important. We're gonna apply the script, activate important objects. And finally we need to add an event which is going to be a key press, and while testing this I was going with the F1 key, so I'm just gonna do that again. So whenever we press the F1 button we want the hide interface script to activate. Okay, everything is snuggled into place, it's time to do some scripting. Another thing I quickly want to mention is that I added a new variable to our global variable script, which is global main menu buttons equals 5. So that indicates how many buttons we want to display, and in case we need some more we can just change this. Okay, let's tend to the easy script first, namely the activate important objects, which is located on the hard end step. In here we first want to check if the world generation has been finished, because only after that we want to actually do that. So if not global world generation and also not global dot island generation, then we want to activate certain things. So let's actually make comments so that we know what we have already taken care of. There will be trees, there will be survivors which we want constantly activated, and we also want the main menu to be activated all the time. In order to activate the trees we only have to type instance activate, and we don't want to activate all, we want to activate an object. The object of course is going to be object trees. And now we can just copy this over for the survivors, yeah, and for the main menu. So every time we deal with a new object in the world which needs to be loaded all the time, we have to add it to this list. Okay, next up we're gonna dive into the main menu. In here we are gonna actually spawn it. We're gonna make sure that the views adjust so that we can see the menu when we want and where we want. If you don't remember, this script is in the create event of the heart, so this is gonna happen at the very beginning of the room and it's only gonna happen once. What we want to do is create a for loop, and depending on how many buttons we actually have, this loop will expand. So here we're gonna say I equals 0, and as long as I is smaller than global.main-menu buttons, we want to increase I plus equal 1. In here we're gonna do a simple instance create for the x coordinate. Now this here is gonna be a little bit more complex because we want to spawn the buttons outside the room so it is not visible. But at the same time we also want the buttons to be visible using the views. So what we're gonna do is spawn it on the left side of the room, no matter how large the room actually is. We're gonna say room width, and it's gonna be 0 for the y coordinate, and we want to spawn the object menu main. Now in here this is gonna be a little bit tricky because we want the first button to spawn at the room width, but the second button we want to spawn at the room width +1 global tile size. The way we can do that is by typing +i times global.tilesize. That means for the first one it's gonna be 0 times global.tilesize, which means it will result in 0, and therefore it's gonna be the room width only. But for the second one it will be 1 times global.tilesize, so it will be one more to the right, which is great. Now in order to actually see the buttons we have to enable the view, and this time it's gonna be view 1, because if you remember, view 0 is already occupied, it's our main view. In order to enable a view we only have to type view visible 1 equals true, and then it will be visible, but of course it will not have the right measurements. We'll have to add that in. So let's first do the view in room. The view in room is gonna be on the right side of the current room. So we have to say view x view of 1 is gonna be the room width. That's where we want to start our view. We also have to assign the y view of 1 to be equal to 0, of course. It's going to be always 0 for the main menu. We also have to decide how wide this is going to be. So the width of view 1 is going to be global.main-menu buttons times global.tilesize. So we can add as many buttons as we want and the view will expand accordingly. We also have to adapt the height of view 1, which is going to be global.tilesize, because our buttons currently have graphics of 1 tile size. Next up we want to focus on the view on the screen, on our actual screen, which is going to be at the bottom on the left side. So we're going to say the view export of 1 equals 0. We want to start at the 0 x coordinate, and the y port on the other hand is going to be the height of the view 0 minus a global.tilesize. Because our buttons again are 1 tile size in height and we want to put them down below on the edge of the screen. We will also have to tell the width of the port, which is going to be global.main-menu buttons times global.tilesize, so we get the same thing as up here. And finally the H port, which is going to be just a global tile size again, because we don't want to have any distortion. These values are actually the same. Now, just to be sure that you actually understand what's going on here, we're gonna briefly go over it again. Right here we're creating the 5 menu buttons on the right side of the room, so it will not be visible just like that. After that we enable an additional view, which we then tell what it should record in the room, and in this case it is actually outside of the room, so in here we just tell what the view should see. With this code we still don't see the buttons. And finally right here, and these are the two values that we have to change in order to place the menu somewhere else. So for instance, we could have the export to be equal 100, and then the menu would only start at 100 pixels. So I hope with that you get the basic gist, and we can move on to the next script. Now there are two more scripts to go. The first one is going to be the assign menu sprites. This one is actually going to be rather easy. This one is located on the create event of the object menu main itself. First of all, we want to set the image speed to 0 so that it doesn't cycle through all of the images. We're also going to create a simple for loop, which is going to be I equals 0, and if I is smaller than global dot main menu buttons, which is going to be 5 in our case, I plus equals 1. It's always the same with the for loops. They are so handy. We want an if statement in here, namely if x equals the room width plus I times global.tilesize, then we want the image index to equal I. So that means for the first check, it's gonna check if x equals room width plus 0, and if that is the case, the image index will be 0. Next, for the number 1, it's gonna check if the room width plus 1 global tile size, and if that is the case, it will be image index 1, and so on and so forth, just with how many buttons we ever need. For loops are just a great thing to use, guys. That's all we had to do for this one. Let's move on to the height interface. You will be surprised, but the height interface is actually the hardest of them all. Ha, just kidding you. All we have to do here is make various titles. For instance, here we're gonna hide the main menu. We're gonna say view visible 1 equals not view visible 1. So now whether or not we have the view already visible, it's gonna switch into the opposite. And that's all. Let's test the game. Okay guys, there we go. We actually accomplished what we intended to do. We have our 5 categories. It is expandable or retractable if we have less categories. We have the basic concept for our interface established. We can now create objects outside the room but make them visible on the interface. Just to give you yet a better idea, look at the top right corner, and if we zoom out a little bit, you can actually see the buttons spawning outside of the room. So we will have to do some tweaking with the zooming effect anyways, but just that you get a better idea. The buttons aren't actually right here, they are up here in the corner. But well guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you very much for watching. I hope I catch you the next time. Bye bye.